6 words, 1 microphone, a political earthquake. At 2:47 p.m. yesterday, a podium glowed under the lights in Jerusalem. Flags hung motion, cameras blinked red. Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, leaned into the mic and delivered a sentence that ricocheted from Whitehall to trading floors. And back again, Britain has betrayed its oldest ally. A breath escaped the room. The click of camera shutters faltered. Reporters looked at one another as if to confirm it actually happened. Then the shockwave hit front pages, breaking tickers, live hits, a swarm of screens blooming with a single scorching narrative, betrayal. But the sentence was only the match, not the fire. Netanyahu raised a folder. Classified. He said communications, he claimed, between Downing Street and groups Israel lists as terror. Linked. Papers, he insisted, that Labour had denied existed. The cameras pushed in. The gravity was undeniable, the authenticity untested. In a crisis, optics move faster than verification, and optics were already 2 steps ahead. If you want to understand why 6 words detonated like this, you have to follow the fuse back 11 days. Starmer's government had quietly paused arms export licenses to Israel, citing humanitarian concerns in Gaza. It was late on a Friday, the corner of the week where bad stories are left to fade. Jerusalem's counterpunch came swift, deliberate, and escalating. A cancelled London visit, 3 British diplomats expelled, and then the public reveal. It was choreography built for global attention. Frames decide narratives, and Israel's frame was brutally simple: loyalty versus betrayal. In a matter of minutes, Britain's role on the world stage was on trial. Not in committee rooms and not in private cables, live global. Now, the first statement lands in Washington like a glass dropped in a quiet room. We are deeply concerned. 2 words carry the weight. Deeply concerned, steady enough to avoid a rupture, sharp enough to signal doubt. It is not a rebuke, not yet. But it is a line on the diplomatic ECG. The first blip that says something is wrong with Britain's rhythm. Paris and Berlin fall back on the oldest of diplomatic language. Silence, no quotes, no colour, just the echo of withheld words. Silence in chancelleries is not absent, it is pressure. Officials brief that consultations are ongoing. Translation, they're watching London and taking notes. In the foreign desks of European papers, a headline template reappears from long-term memory: Britain isolated. Editors dust off comparisons reserved for grave moments. One senior official in Brussels, off the record naturally, says this feels like Suez but accelerated. Back then, the humiliation took weeks. Today, it takes minutes. Inside Whitehall, phones don't ring, they scream. A director, level civil servant, scrawls 3 columns on a whiteboard. Allies, Massachusetts rockets, domestic. Under allies, the arrows point downward. Under markets, the arrows multiply. Under domestic, someone writes in capital letters, veterans, fey communities, fey polls. The choreography of crisis fills the corridors, aides moving too fast to appear calm, ministers walking too slowly to appear rattled. The Foreign Office is at the centre of a spiderweb of calls: Washington to London, London to Paris, Paris to Berlin, and back again. Each conversation turns on the same hinge question: did London act on principle without preparing its partners, or did London flinch in a way that invites doubt? In a secure room, a small group stares at a flat screen, looping the Jerusalem clip. The 6 words are replayed, transcribed, passed. The folder lifted on, camera is freeze, framed, enhanced, then zoomed out again, every frame an argument, every angle a potential alibi or indictment. Optics outrun facts. Someone says, we need facts to catch up. Across the Atlantic, a Senate staffer texts a UK counterpart, we can defend a policy difference. We can't defend looking unreliable. In the EU quarter, a veteran diplomat shrugs. Reliability is currency, spend it, and markets notice before friends do. And by early evening, embassies in London are filing their first day reads. One theme returns like a chorus line: Britain's decision might be arguable. Britain's preparation was not. And in the mind of allies, preparation is the difference between courage and carelessness. Whitehall crafts 2 statements. The first is technical. Soporific, designed to slow the blood process, review legal thresholds, humanitarian criteria. The second is human, aimed at nerves and screens. Britain's commitment to its allies remains ironclad. The question unspoken but present in every draft: will ironclad sound like confidence or like someone jangling an empty suit of armour? The blast wave does not stop at borders. It slams into Britain's front rooms. By mid-morning, a video starts its long climb up the feeds. A retired parachute regiment colonel stands in full dress uniform. The ribbon bar catches a shard of winter light. His voice is clipped, careful, then suddenly raw. We bled together, we buried brothers together, and now we call this policy. The clip vaults past 1 million views before lunchtime, and the comments read like a veteran's roll call: regiments, tours, names. It isn't about geopolitics, it's about promise and the feeling that a promise was broken. In a North London synagogue, the volunteer security rota fills without anyone needing to ask. Parents who never hang around at drop-off linger by the gate a few minutes longer. Eyes on the street community groups distribute helplines and safety tips. An inbox at a communal charity fills. The word again arrives so often, it ceases to be a word and becomes a weather pattern. A rabbi records a 2-minute message, measured, pastoral, offering calm and solidarity. It goes viral because it sounds like a lifeline. Local radio describes it as a weekend of vigils. In Manchester, dozens of veterans are there with Israeli flags and regimental standards in Leeds. Jewish leaders and former service members speak from the same small platform, different experiences, shared vocabulary, duty, loyalty, fear. A police drone whirs overhead. What the camera can't show is the tautness in the air, that feeling of too much history crowding, too little space. Newsrooms, sensing where the centre of gravity has shifted, summon the front page verdicts. One paper hits like a hammer, 2 words: betrayed again. Another goes forensic: licenses, leaks, and the law. A broadsheet prints a sober set of questions which lands harder than outrage. What was decided? Who knew? What was prepared? What comes next? Polling firms run late, night dials, and numbers harden as fast as narratives. Approval curves that climbed with ease shed points with the ruthless efficiency of a guillotine among the over -50s. The cohort that treats voting not as a right but a ritual, the line lurches downward. In constituency offices from Durham to Sunderland, staffers man phones with the peculiar politeness of British fury. I am not shouting. I am just done on Whitehall lunch breaks. If anyone is still taking them, the talk is less about the foreign desk and more about the front doorstep. You can brief allies, one aide mutters, but you cannot brief grief. It is the first lesson of domestic politics in a foreign storm. The map shrinks to people. You know, streets you walk, schools your children attend. By late afternoon, a senior strategist is pinning up a fresh sheet, 3 columns again: emotion, evidence, economy. We have to answer all 3, she says, and we have to do it before tonight's bulletins. The British Constitution is a tapestry woven with things left unsaid. One of those threads is royal neutrality. Durable, invisible, never tugged. Until tonight, it starts out as a whisper. Remarks at a private reception for Commonwealth envoys, meant to be cordial, customary, and completely forgettable, have landed like a hammer. The line, when it surfaces, is simple and grave. Britain's strength has always rested on honouring our commitments to allies who stand with us in darkness. When we abandon those commitments, we abandon ourselves. No names, no finger pointing, and yet every syllable feels like it has a postage stamp addressed to number. 10, it is a word courtiers detest, but unprecedented, keeps seeping into the air. The palace, normally speaking in seasons and ceremonies, seems to have opted for verbs: drafted, redrafted, insisted. The implication, it was never stated, only intimated, is that the king insisted on draft after draft until the cadence conveyed not just caution but conviction. Then comes another whisper. The Prince of Wales was consulted, father and son weighing words the way regents weigh crowns. The government response machine grinds, sputters, then coughs into life. Tonight, every statement risks the wobble on that narrow line between reassurance and defensiveness. To ignore the palace would look petulant. To echo, it would look chastened. Downing Street chooses a middle path, a salute to institutions, a reiteration of shared values, the sort of dignified phrasing designed to calm footage rather than correct it. But protocol is a living thing. When it shifts, the country can feel the floorboards move. Commentators who once treated royal language like weather now pass it like case law. Former private secretaries speak of duty of care to the realm. Constitutional experts pull down volumes with titles that sound like old ships. The question flows beneath all of it. If the Crown feels compelled to speak, what does that say about the silence elsewhere? It is a more straightforward effect in living rooms. Those who pay no attention to politics but do to the monarchy stop stirring their tea. They look up, whatever else may be in dispute. This much is not. Something grave is occurring. By midnight, an editor emails a headline that will win both praise and scorn. Protocol broken. And across the river, a strategist writes 2 words at the top of a memo: rebuild trust. Markets don't argue, they react. By the opening bell, sterling blinks, first a wobble, then a meaningful lean. Traders call it price discovery, the polite term for nerves. The FTSE board becomes a field of red pixels, tiny wounded squares pulsing under fluorescent light. You can see it on the trading floor, the shared glance after an unexpected downtick, the way voices go soft when screens go loud. In a glass-walled conference room high over the city, a risk committee drains the room of adjectives and fills it with verbs: hedge, rotate, de-risk, pause. A currency strategist sketches the story on one slide. Politics became policy. Policy became uncertainty. Uncertainty became costs. It is a chain reaction everyone understands, even if they disagree about the spark. Later in the morning, the gilt traders test the fences. Yields inch up, sniffing the air for smoke. A portfolio manager scratches a figure on a yellow pad, how much to reweight from UK exposure, without telling the clients the thing that is feared, that reliability, the quiet backbone of investment, feels suddenly negotiable. Boardrooms don't wait for guidance in these cases. They convene a century-old British pedigree in defence manufacturing maps, a plan B on the whiteboard. What can be moved, what must stay, who needs calling in Dublin, Warsaw, Brussels. The room is full of engineers who dislike politics and financiers who dislike surprises. They concur on one sentence. Optionality isn't disloyalty. It is duty to payroll. Across town, a mid-sized tech firm with Israeli partners takes a different call. A founder who has never raised her voice raises it now. We built bridges for years. Are we burning them? Her legal counsel leans on words like compliance and clarity, then admits that there is less of both today than yesterday. The operations lead asks for a rule of thumb. We need policy that survives 3 news cycles, she says, not 1. By lunch, union offices hum at cross. Purposes: protect jobs, protect wages, protect future contracts, protect the idea that Britain is where high-skill work belongs. A veteran organiser who has never been sentimental about global supply chains says the quiet part aloud: you can't wave a flag over empty factories. Talking points are drafted at speed by the Chancellor's staff. They reach for sturdy metaphors, foundations, bedrock, steel frame. As if architecture can reassure arithmetic, the numbers department, less poetically, draws 3 boxes: FX, equities, employment. A note underneath the 3rd reads, this is the one that wins or loses the argument at payday. Evening bulletins arrive with their old-fashioned choreography, anchors, graphics, a sober voice. Over there are no crashes, only corrections, no panics, only repricings, yet one single chart. The pound sliding cleanly left to right does more to stiffen spines and sour stomachs than 1,000 cautious verbs. Late in the day, a CEO on the cusp of an expansion round takes a walk in the drizzle. He calls his Israel-based partner and speaks without scripts. We'll get through this, he says, and believes it until the line goes quiet. What he cannot say is what his board now demands, a contingency for the contingency. And in living rooms far from Bloomberg terminals, the signal arrives in plainer packaging. A friend texts a friend, my hours were cut. Another, hiring freeze. Numbers may be abstract, but the absence of a shift on next week's rota is not. When markets tremble, someone loses a night's sleep. By midnight, a memo circulates through number 10 with a sentence underlined twice. Narrative shapes sentiment, numbers decide elections. The reply in a smaller hand reads, fix both. Now by noon, the meeting booked for 60 minutes refuses to end. The clock in the cabinet room is an accessory to chaos. By the second hour, ministers are speaking past one another. By the third, they're speaking at one another. The language hardens from concern to cost, from principle to polling, from process to power. Somewhere between briefings and blame, a folder skids across polished wood and lands with a slap that says what no one will. This isn't about the communique, it is about the consequences. In the anteroom, aides trade messages in a blur of blue and green bubbles. One thread is titled Numbers Not Adjectives, another more blunt. Exit route. A senior whip sketches a Gantt chart no one asked for today. Containment. Tonight, discipline. Tomorrow, vote. Against each line, he writes a percentage, compliance, defection, unknowns. The largest number inevitably is the last. The parliamentary party is an abacus alive, and somebody's moving the beads letters. How many drafted, how many sent, how many merely promised in the heat of a corridor whisper. Resignations, who threatens, who actually walks, who angles for a bigger desk after the dust settles. Media round, Robbins, who says full confidence with their eyes, who says it with only their teeth. In one cramped office smelling of instant coffee and old carpet. A backbencher who has never made front page weather becomes a weather vane. Her WhatsApp pings like a Geiger counter. She keeps a paper list, names in columns, marks in pencil, because paper can't be subpoenaed by a screenshot. A former whip sits on the radiator and offers the only sentence that calms a revolt. There will be a vote. There will be a choice. Choose the arithmetic that ends with a government. The leadership shadow falls across the atrium. One hopeful moves with studied invisibility, murmuring to colleagues about competence and calm. Another chooses visibility, gathering MPs in a beige committee room where the tea tastes of cardboard and ambition. A would-be unity candidate rehearses the line that could make or unmake them. This is not about one decision, it is about how decisions are made. The press office sniffing the air, senses audition tapes. Downstairs, the Prime Minister meets advisers in a smaller room where the portraits look down like judges. The council is unanimous and contradictory on the principle. Fix the process. Stop the bleeding. Drafts of a broadcast statement multiply until they all say the same thing differently. The strategic choice is a trident. Apologise for communication, not conviction. Invite scrutiny, not surrender. Set a timeline that turns a stampede into a queue. Outside, the lobby awaits, notebooks cocked like traps. A minister emerges to deliver a line about collective responsibility that convinces no one, least of all themselves. A junior aide, unknown to the public and indispensable to the machine, whispers to a colleague, "We're not losing arguments, we're losing time." In Members' Tea, a veteran MP tells a parable about leadership challenges past. The first letters are passionate, the last letters are pragmatic. Count the middle the advice lands because it is math disguised as folklore on another bench. A rising star checks two clocks, the one on the wall and the one only they can see, the hour when not moving becomes moving too late. By dusk, the party is a weather map. Patches of high pressure around safe seats, storms gathering over marginals, a slow front of doubt rolling in from the shires. If you listen closely, you can hear the hinge creak, the moment a private grievance becomes a public momentum. Revolts don't begin with speeches, they begin with schedules. At 7:58 p.m, the whip texts a number to a strategist. It is smaller than disaster and larger than comfort. The reply comes in 3 words: hold till Monday. The strategist pockets the phone and stares through the window at the lights across the river. They know the thing every practitioner learns and every pundit forgets. Politics is not about who shouts the loudest. It's about who can count in the dark. Leaks don't arrive like thunderclaps. They seep. First, a screenshot with margins cropped. Then a memo with the footer intact. Then a calendar line no one expected to survive a redaction. Each piece on its own is ambiguous together. They start to hum. In a windowless basement room, thick with stale coffee, half a dozen officials lay out printouts on green baize like fragments of pottery, email headers, meeting invites, briefing notes whose verbs have been softened into gerunds. The question that matters isn't what does it say, but what can we prove? In Whitehall, chain of custody is everything. Screenshots are theatre, metadata is evidence. 3 frameworks loom over the table as stern invigilators: the Ministerial Code, process, propriety, disclosure, the Official Secrets Act, who saw what, when and why, the Terrorism Act 2000, the hard edges around prescribed groups, and any contact that could be construed as facilitation. A lawyer with that precise diction of someone who thinks in footnotes, draws lines between the fragments, what counts as briefing, what counts as contact, what falls under the safe harbour of back-channel diplomacy and what does not. The standard, she reminds the room, isn't outrage, it's justiciability. Upstairs, committee sharpen pencils, the Intelligence and Security Committee eyes jurisdiction, Foreign Affairs drafts witness lists, Home Affairs wants a timeline before breakfast. On another floor, the Cabinet Office prepares a lessons learned review that everybody knows is simultaneously sincere and strategic truth-finding as damage control. Across the river, lawyers draw the slope from politics to police. You feel the temperature drop when someone says CPS threshold. Words change shape, allegation becomes complaint, document becomes exhibit, briefing becomes statement. The civil service has a phrase for this pivot from narrative to record. In newsrooms, editors grapple with a different responsibility, what to print and when. The safest line is attribution. Documents purporting to show sources allege, Downing Street denies. A correspondent who has worn out the carpets of select committee rooms offers a rule of thumb. If the leak fixes a date, find 3 independent ways to fix that date. If it names a room, find 2 people who were in it and 1 who was turned away at the door. Meanwhile, the political clock refuses to stop. The backbencher reads the leaks not as text, but as timing. What lands before Monday's emergency debate, what lands during, what lands after, as a reminder that stories do not end when votes are counted. At 10:11, a single-page advice note appears, an innocuous-looking thing, explosive in implication. It doesn't say that anyone did anything unlawful. It says in the frosted language of Whitehall that clarity would be desirable on the status of certain organisations and the nature of any contacts. In political terms, that is not a siren. It is a fire alarm behind glass. Break only in an emergency. Downing Street weighs options, publish a chronology, push for an independent review, offer the committee chairs private sight of unredacted material. Each option is a trade. Sunlight buys credibility at the price of control.